Judge William Harrington prided himself on his sharp wit and an ironclad demeanor that could humble the most arrogant attorneys. In his courtroom, appearances mattered. Whether one entered wearing a $1,000 suit or a threadbare jacket, he expected a polished argument and adherence to protocol. So, when a rugged man with weathered boots, a slightly crumpled button-up shirt, and a shadow of stubble on his chiseled jaw strolled into the courtroom one morning, Judge Harrington's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates." "Mr. Clint Eastwood," he announced, barely concealing his condescension as he read the name off the docket. "Representing yourself, I presume?" Clint Eastwood, the man who had captivated audiences for decades with his steely gaze and laconic delivery, nodded with a calm confidence. "That's right, Your Honor," he said, his gravelly voice filling the room. The crowd in the gallery exchanged glances, some whispering in hushed tones about whether the famed actor was serious or staging an elaborate publicity stunt. Judge Harrington leaned back in his chair, his gavel resting lazily in his hand. "This isn't a film set, Mr. Eastwood. Courtrooms are no place for theatrics. I hope you're prepared because this isn't a game." Clint's lips quirked into a small, knowing smile. "No, sir, I wouldn't dream of treating this like a game." The opposing counsel, an impeccably dressed young attorney named Richard Delaney, suppressed a chuckle. He assumed this was going to be an easy win, a rare opportunity to best an iconic celebrity while bolstering his own reputation. But as the proceedings began, something remarkable unfolded. The case was a complex dispute involving copyright claims against a production company Clint was affiliated with. Delaney opened with a polished and aggressive statement peppered with legal jargon meant to impress the judge and overwhelm the untrained eye. Clint listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When it was Clint's turn to address the court, he rose from his seat, moving with a deliberate grace that made every eye in the room follow him. "Your Honor, if I may," he began, his voice steady and strong. What followed was nothing short of astonishing. Clint's argument was measured and precise. He dissected the opposing counsel's claims with an ease that suggested a deep understanding of copyright law. He cited case precedents effortlessly, drawing connections that others might have missed. The courtroom fell silent as he painted a picture of the issue at hand, using analogies and stories to simplify complex legal concepts. His words weren't flashy, but they carried weight, each one deliberate, each one purposeful. Judge Harrington narrowed his eyes, leaning forward in his chair. His smirk faded as he realized Clint wasn't just spouting off memorized lines or relying on charisma to sway the court. He was building a case brick by brick, and the foundation was rock solid. "Where did you study law, Mr. Eastwood?" the judge interrupted at one point, unable to hide his curiosity. Clint paused, locking eyes with Harrington. "I didn't, Your Honor," he said plainly. "But I've spent years dealing with contracts, negotiations, and legal disputes. Enough time to know my way around the law." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Harrington's gaze flickered with something bordering on respect, though he masked it quickly. "Proceed," he said curtly. As the day unfolded, Clint continued to dismantle the opposing counsel's case. Delaney, who had initially radiated confidence, began to falter. He stammered when Clint questioned his interpretations of certain legal principles. He fumbled with his papers, unable to keep up with the calm yet relentless pressure Clint exerted. The gallery watched in awe as the tables turned. By midday, the whispers in the courtroom had grown louder. Reporters outside were buzzing, and social media was ablaze with speculation about Clint Eastwood's unexpected legal prowess. When the court adjourned for a lunch break, Delaney approached Clint in the hallway. His earlier bravado had vanished. "Mr. Eastwood," he said, his tone tinged with desperation, "you're really something else. Maybe we could settle this out of court?" Clint raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a wry smile. "Funny, you didn't seem interested in settling this morning." Delaney flushed, mumbling an excuse before retreating. Clint watched him go, shaking his head slightly. He turned and walked outside, where a throng of reporters awaited. Cameras flashed and microphones were thrust toward him. "Mr. Eastwood, how are you pulling this off? Do you have a secret legal team advising you?" one reporter asked. Clint chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No secret team, just common sense and a willingness to do my homework." Back inside, Judge Harrington sat in his chambers deep in thought. The man he had dismissed as a mere entertainer had proven to be one of the sharpest individuals he'd encountered in his career. Harrington prided himself on being unflappable, but Clint's performance had rattled him. He decided to probe further during the afternoon session. When court resumed, the atmosphere was charged. Harrington scrutinized Clint's every move, searching for cracks in his composure. But Clint never wavered. He continued to present his arguments with the same calm authority, even countering the judge's pointed questions with ease. At one point, Harrington interrupted again. "Mr. Eastwood, I must say, you've surprised me today. But I can't help wondering, why didn't you hire an attorney? Surely someone of your stature could afford the best legal minds in the business." Clint met the judge's gaze evenly. "Because, Your Honor, I wanted to stand up for myself. Sometimes you've got to take matters into your own hands." The courtroom erupted in applause, which Harrington promptly silenced with a sharp rap of his gavel. But even he couldn't hide the faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. By the end of the day, Clint had effectively dismantled the plaintiff's case. His final argument was a masterclass in clarity and conviction, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind about the strength of his position. When he sat down, the courtroom was silent, save for the scribbling of notes by the court reporter. Judge Harrington delivered his ruling the following morning. As he summarized his decision, his tone was uncharacteristically warm. "Mr. Eastwood, I'll admit I was skeptical when you walked into this courtroom, but you've shown a level of intelligence, preparation, and composure that few trained attorneys could match. It's clear to me that you've not only defended yourself, but also set an example of what true advocacy looks like." With that, Harrington ruled in Clint's favor. The courtroom erupted into cheers, and even the judge didn't bother to silence them this time. Clint nodded respectfully, his face betraying only a flicker of satisfaction. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed him again, eager for a comment. Clint raised a hand to quiet the crowd. "I'm not a lawyer," he said simply. "I'm just a guy who believes in standing up for what's right. And I think we could all do with a little more of that." The story of Clint Eastwood's courtroom triumph spread like wildfire. It became the stuff of legend, a tale of humility, perseverance, and brilliance that transcended the boundaries of Hollywood and the legal world. And as Judge Harrington reflected on the case in the weeks that followed, he couldn't help but chuckle to himself. Sometimes, he thought, the best lessons come from the most unexpected places. As the news of Clint Eastwood's courtroom triumph rippled through the media, the world began to dissect the story with an almost obsessive zeal. Journalists and pundits analyzed every word of his arguments, every movement he made in court, and every facial expression he displayed. Social media platforms were awash with memes and hashtags like #ClintTheCounselor and #Eastwood in Court, celebrating the unanticipated brilliance of an actor stepping into the shoes of a lawyer. Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood went about his day with the same understated humility that had characterized his decades-long career. He returned to his modest ranch in California, where he spent his mornings tending to his horses and his evenings poring over scripts or legal documents, depending on the needs of the day. The man who had just stunned the legal world saw no reason to gloat or capitalize on the attention. For Clint, it wasn't about the fame, it never had been. But while Clint was content to let the moment pass, others were not. Within days, law schools began reaching out to him, inviting him to deliver lectures on self-representation and the art of advocacy. The offers came pouring in from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and even the London School of Economics, all eager to host the man who had made a mockery of conventional wisdom in the courtroom. Clint declined them all with polite sincerity, saying, "I appreciate the honor, but I'm just a man who does his homework." It wasn't just the academic world that was clamoring for Clint's insight. Hollywood, too, saw an opportunity. Studios and production companies inundated him with pitches for courtroom dramas and legal thrillers, all envisioning Clint as the star, or even the director of stories inspired by his real-life triumph. But Clint's interest in these projects was lukewarm at best. "Real life is drama enough," he said to a close friend over a cup of coffee, his voice carrying that trademark blend of grit and wisdom. Despite his reluctance to bask in the spotlight, Clint couldn't avoid the ripple effects of his victory. Lawyers across the country began using his case as a benchmark for unconventional success in court. CLE, Continuing Legal Education Seminars, featured sessions titled Lessons from Clint Eastwood, Mastering the Art of Simplicity and Persuasion. Even seasoned attorneys who had spent decades perfecting their craft found themselves marveling at how a man without formal legal training had outmaneuvered one of the sharpest young litigators in the game. Among those most affected by Clint's win was Judge Harrington himself. The experience had left an indelible mark on the seasoned jurist. He found himself replaying the trial in his mind, analyzing Clint's approach and comparing it to the thousands of other cases he had presided over. Harrington had always believed in the power of education and experience, yet Clint's performance had challenged his long-held assumptions. The judge even went so far as to draft an article for a prestigious legal journal titled "Wisdom Beyond the Bar: Reflections on an Unlikely Advocate." In it, he explored how Clint's ability to distill complex legal arguments into relatable, compelling narratives had not only swayed the courtroom, but also reminded everyone of the core purpose of the legal system: to seek truth and justice. Meanwhile, Richard Delaney, the opposing counsel who had initially underestimated Clint, found himself at a crossroads. The loss had stung more deeply than he cared to admit. Delaney had built his career on meticulous preparation and a certain swagger that came from consistently winning high-profile cases. But Clint's calm dismantling of his arguments had exposed a weakness he hadn't even realized he possessed: his reliance on convoluted language and showmanship. Determined to redeem himself, Delaney took a 6-month sabbatical to study the art of communication, even enrolling in acting classes to better understand how to connect with an audience. Ironically, he often cited Clint as his inspiration for this transformative journey, telling colleagues, "If Clint Eastwood can walk into a courtroom and out-argue me without a law degree, I've got a lot to learn." As time went on, the case began to take on an almost mythical status. It became a staple in law school curriculums, a modern-day David and Goliath tale where intellect, preparation, and authenticity triumphed over arrogance and assumptions. Students wrote papers analyzing Clint's strategies, pointing out how his ability to use plain language and analogies made his arguments more accessible to the jury and the judge. Professors used his performance as a case study in the power of emotional intelligence in the courtroom, emphasizing how Clint's genuine passion and belief in his case resonated more deeply than any amount of legal jargon could. Yet, despite the growing legend, Clint himself remained unchanged. His days were spent much as they had always been, balancing his passions for filmmaking, music, and the quiet solitude of ranch life. Occasionally, he would receive letters from aspiring lawyers and everyday people who had been inspired by his story. One such letter, from a single mother who had successfully represented herself in a custody case, struck a chord with Clint. She wrote, "You gave me the courage to believe that I could do this. Watching you stand up in that courtroom reminded me that sometimes the truth is the most powerful tool we have." Clint kept her letter tucked away in a drawer, pulling it out from time to time as a reminder of the quiet impact one person could have. Despite his preference for a low profile, Clint couldn't entirely avoid the public's fascination. During one of his rare interviews, a journalist asked him point blank, "Do you ever see yourself pursuing a career in law? You've already proven you've got what it takes." Clint chuckled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Nah, I think I'll leave the lawyering to the professionals. I'm better at telling stories, whether it's on film or in court, but I'll say this: the world would be a better place if more people stood up for themselves, not just in court, but in life." The quote went viral, resonating with people from all walks of life. It wasn't just lawyers or law students who found inspiration in Clint's words. It was anyone who had ever faced an uphill battle and wondered if they had what it took to persevere. Clint's story became a rallying cry for self-empowerment, a reminder that expertise wasn't always measured by degrees or titles, but by the willingness to learn, prepare, and stand tall in the face of adversity. In the years that followed, the case faded from the headlines, but never from memory. Judge Harrington retired, citing Clint's case as one of the most memorable of his career. Richard Delaney returned to practice, a humbler and more effective attorney than he had been before. And Clint Eastwood continued to carve his unique path, a living testament to the idea that life's greatest victories often come from the most unexpected challenges. One day, years after the trial, Clint received an invitation in the mail. It was from a small community legal clinic in a struggling neighborhood. They wanted him to speak at a fundraiser to help raise money for their programs. which provided free legal aid to those who couldn't afford it. Clint hesitated at first. Public speaking wasn't his favorite pastime. But something about the invitation tugged at him. When the night of the fundraiser arrived, Clint stood before a modest crowd in a school gymnasium. He looked out at the faces, some eager, some skeptical, and began to speak in that familiar, gravelly voice that carried the weight of experience. He didn't talk about his fame or his career. Instead, he told the story of the courtroom, the lessons he had learned about preparation, authenticity, and the courage to fight for what's right. His words were simple but profound, and by the end of the night, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The clinic raised more money than they had ever dreamed possible, thanks in part to Clint's presence. But for Clint, the true reward was seeing the spark of determination in the eyes of the people who had come to listen. As he left the gymnasium that night, a young girl ran up to him and handed him a hand-drawn picture of a courtroom with a small figure standing tall behind a podium. "That's you," she said shyly. "My mom said you're a hero." Clint knelt down, accepting the picture with a gentle smile. "Heroes are just people who do what needs to be done," he said. "And I think your mom's the real hero." As he walked away, the picture tucked safely under his arm, Clint Eastwood felt a quiet satisfaction. He hadn't set out to change the world or even prove a point, but in doing what needed to be done, he had shown others that they could too. And that was more than enough. The quiet aftermath of Clint Eastwood's courtroom saga allowed his life to settle back into its usual rhythm, but its ripple effects continued to unfold in ways he could never have anticipated. His story had transcended mere legal and entertainment news, becoming a cultural phenomenon that stirred debate, inspired action, and even reshaped the public's perception of what it meant to stand up for oneself. One notable outcome was the renewed public interest in the concept of self-representation in courtrooms. The case sparked a nationwide dialogue about access to justice and the barriers many people face when navigating the legal system. Legal experts debated whether Clint's victory represented an outlier, a case where charisma and preparation aligned perfectly, or if it illuminated a deeper truth about the potential of ordinary people to advocate for themselves when properly equipped with knowledge. Activist organizations began lobbying for reforms to make the legal system more accessible to those who couldn't afford representation. They argued that Clint's story highlighted the need for clearer legal resources, plain language guides, and better support for self-represented litigants. In response, a grassroots movement emerged, urging bar associations and courts to embrace simpler processes and provide free workshops for people preparing to represent themselves. Dubbed the Eastwood Initiative, these programs quickly gained traction across the United States, empowering thousands of individuals to tackle their legal challenges with newfound confidence. Meanwhile, Clint himself found his influence extending into unexpected corners. One day, he received a letter from a young woman named Angela, who worked as a paralegal in a small town. She had read every article about his courtroom performance and felt compelled to reach out. In her letter, she shared her struggles. She had always dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but felt constrained by financial hardships and societal expectations. Watching Clint dismantle a seasoned attorney's case, she wrote, had given her the courage to enroll in law school. Clint was moved by Angela's letter. He wrote back, offering words of encouragement and sharing the philosophy that had guided him throughout his life. Hard work, determination, and an unshakable belief in oneself could overcome even the tallest obstacles. Over the years, Angela would go on to graduate at the top of her class, eventually opening a law firm dedicated to serving underprivileged clients. In interviews, she often credited Clint's courtroom victory as the spark that ignited her journey. While Clint's influence inspired individuals like Angela, it also captured the imagination of Hollywood in ways he couldn't entirely avoid. Filmmakers clamored to adapt his courtroom experience into a movie, envisioning a dramatic legal thriller with Clint himself at the helm. For months, scripts poured in, each one trying to dramatize his already remarkable story. Clint, ever the perfectionist, rejected them all. It wasn't until a young, up-and-coming screenwriter approached him with an unconventional pitch that Clint reconsidered. The writer proposed a film that wasn't a direct retelling of the courtroom saga, but a broader exploration of themes like resilience, justice, and the underdog's struggle. Intrigued by the fresh perspective, Clint agreed to produce the film, although he declined to star in it. The result was Beyond the Bench, a critically acclaimed drama that won multiple awards and resonated deeply with audiences worldwide. While the film's story was fictionalized, its emotional core captured the essence of Clint's real-life experience. The movie became a touchstone for conversations about fairness and the power of individuals to challenge authority, cementing Clint's legacy in both cinema and public consciousness. Back at his ranch, Clint remained as grounded as ever. He spent his days indulging in the simple pleasures of life, tending to his horses, enjoying long walks in the countryside, and playing the piano late into the night. Despite the continued buzz surrounding his courtroom triumph, he rarely spoke of it, choosing instead to let his actions and principles speak for themselves. However, Clint's reluctance to dwell on his own achievements didn't stop others from seeking his guidance. Over time, a steady stream of visitors began arriving at his ranch, each hoping for a moment of wisdom from the man who had become something of a folk hero. They came from all walks of life: struggling single parents, aspiring actors, young lawyers, and even seasoned judges. Clint greeted them all with the same quiet humility, offering advice that was equal parts practical and profound. One visitor, a young filmmaker named Jordan, came to Clint seeking advice on navigating the pressures of the entertainment industry. Jordan had heard stories about Clint's reputation for standing firm against studio demands and wanted to learn how to balance artistic integrity with commercial success. Clint listened patiently as Jordan shared his struggles, then leaned back in his chair and said, "You can't control what the world wants from you, but you can control what you give to it. Make sure what you give is true to who you are." Jordan would later credit that conversation with inspiring his breakout film, a gritty indie drama that earned critical acclaim and launched his career. Stories like Jordan's became common as Clint continued to inspire those who crossed his path. Meanwhile, the legal world wasn't done with Clint. Law schools began incorporating his case into their curricula, using it as a teaching tool to emphasize the importance of preparation, clarity, and authenticity in advocacy. Professors assigned students to analyze his arguments, encouraging them to think critically about the intersection of law and storytelling. In some ways, Clint became an unlikely icon of legal education, a role he never sought but quietly embraced. The Clint Eastwood case even found its way into the realm of public policy. Lawmakers, inspired by the accessibility issues his trial had highlighted, began pushing for reforms to make legal resources more widely available. Some states implemented pilot programs that provided free legal clinics for low-income residents, while others introduced legislation requiring courts to simplify legal documents for self-represented litigants. These changes, while incremental, marked a significant step toward bridging the gap between the legal system and the people it served. Despite all this, Clint's greatest contribution might have been the intangible impact he had on society's collective mindset. His story reminded people of the power of persistence and the value of authenticity. It wasn't just about winning a court case. It was about proving that anyone, no matter their background or circumstances, could rise to meet a challenge if they were willing to put in the effort. Years later, a renowned journalist conducted a retrospective piece on Clint's courtroom victory, interviewing everyone from Judge Harrington to Angela, the now successful lawyer. When asked what they believed Clint's legacy would be, Harrington summed it up best: "Clint Eastwood didn't just win a case, he showed us all that courage, preparation, and conviction can make the impossible possible. He reminded us that the law is ultimately about people, and that's a lesson we do well to remember." For Clint, the legacy wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about the lives he had touched and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had stayed true to himself. Whether he was in front of a camera, behind a director's chair, or standing alone in a courtroom, Clint had always followed the same guiding principle: to live with integrity and to fight for what mattered. As the years went by, the world changed in countless ways, but Clint's story endured. It was retold in classrooms, courtrooms, and living rooms, becoming a timeless reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. And though Clint himself preferred the solitude of his ranch, far from the noise of fame and accolades, his impact continued to echo far beyond the quiet hills he called home. Years passed, and Clint Eastwood's courtroom triumph became a cultural touchstone, a symbol of perseverance, wit, and the power of the individual. Though he rarely mentioned the case, its influence quietly shaped the lives of countless people. One particularly striking example came from a young boy named Marco, who lived in a small, struggling town in the Midwest. Marco, the son of immigrant parents, dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but felt overwhelmed by the obstacles in his path. One night, while scrolling through videos online, Marco stumbled across a clip of Clint's courtroom argument. The video, recorded surreptitiously by an audience member, had gone viral years earlier and was still circulating as a source of inspiration. Marco watched, riveted, as Clint's calm confidence and unyielding logic unfolded. It was unlike anything he'd seen before. In Clint's performance, Marco saw more than a celebrity defending himself. He saw the embodiment of courage and determination. That night, Marco made a decision. He would pursue his dream of becoming a lawyer no matter how difficult the journey. Over the years, he worked tirelessly, excelling in school and eventually earning a scholarship to a prestigious law program. When asked in interviews about his inspiration, Marco would always say, "If Clint Eastwood could walk into a courtroom and prove himself, so could I." Marco's journey was just one of many sparked by Clint's story. Across the globe, people from all walks of life found courage in his example. Activists fighting for justice, educators pushing for systemic reforms, and everyday individuals navigating personal challenges drew strength from the tale of an actor who had dared to take on the legal world and prevailed. Meanwhile, Clint's influence subtly reshaped cultural attitudes toward resilience and self-representation. His case prompted a wave of television shows and films that celebrated underdogs, inspiring storytellers to explore the themes of perseverance and authenticity in new and innovative ways. From indie dramas to big-budget blockbusters, the echoes of Clint's courtroom victory rippled through pop culture, enriching its narrative landscape. In his personal life, Clint continued to embrace simplicity. Though the world viewed him as a legend, he remained focused on the small, meaningful moments that brought him joy, mending fences on his ranch, sharing quiet meals with close friends, and composing music on his piano. Occasionally, he would receive a letter or an email thanking him for the impact he'd made, and though he rarely responded, he kept each message in a box in his study. To Clint, these tokens of gratitude were more valuable than any trophy or accolade. In the twilight of his life, Clint's legacy became clearer than ever. He had not only shaped cinema, but had also reminded the world of an enduring truth. Strength lies not in titles or expertise, but in the determination to stand up, speak out, and face challenges with courage and conviction. His courtroom victory may have been a moment in time, but its lessons would resonate for generations to come. As Clint Eastwood grew older, the legend of his courtroom victory took on a life of its own, evolving into a parable that transcended its origins. Students, scholars, and ordinary people alike recounted the tale, not just as a story of triumph, but as a profound example of self-reliance and grit. Yet Clint himself rarely reflected on it. For him, it wasn't the defining chapter of his life, but simply one more instance where he had acted in accordance with his principles. In quieter moments as he walked the rolling hills of his ranch, Clint found peace in the knowledge that his actions had sparked something far greater than the outcome of a single trial. Whether it was the young lawyer dedicating their career to justice or the struggling family finding the courage to stand up for their rights, his story had become a beacon of hope. Clint often said life was about doing what needed to be done with humility and purpose. He never sought accolades, yet the ripples of his choices continued to influence countless lives. In the end, his legacy wasn't just about fame or success. It was about the quiet power of standing firm and letting the truth speak for itself. Clint Eastwood's life carried on with the steady rhythm he had cultivated over decades. Yet his influence reached far beyond the ranch he called home. Unbeknownst to many, the courtroom triumph became a catalyst for a broader cultural shift. It was no longer just a tale of an actor defying expectations. It had become a testament to the importance of resilience in a world that often seems stacked against the ordinary individual. One of the most unexpected consequences of Clint's legacy was the emergence of community-led legal aid initiatives inspired by his story. In small towns and urban neighborhoods alike, volunteers began organizing workshops to demystify legal processes, empowering people to advocate for themselves. These grassroots efforts were often spearheaded by those who had been touched by Clint's story, and they carried his ethos forward: preparation, authenticity, and the courage to act. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on a judge mocking Clint Eastwood in court? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.